Hey, hey, hey! Gordias here, coming at you with the video on 1.2 part 2. And today we're adding integers with different signs. So if you have not seen 1.2 part 1, and you have not finished those notes, you do need to go back and watch that video first. Do not continue unless you've watched that video. Alright, so what we're going to do is we're going to add integers with different signs. So we are focusing on adding a positive integer with a negative integer. So something like -3 plus +5, or let's say 125 plus -300. Adding a positive with a negative number. That's what we mean by different signs. So key terms here, sum. Okay, so sum is a total to an addition problem. It's the answer to an addition problem. And then we also have the key term of zero pair. Okay, so zero pair, that was a term that we used in part 1. But it's when we added one positive integer and one negative integer together, and they cancel each other out to make 0. So if ever I have +1 and I have a -1, +1 and -1, when I combine those, they make 0, because 1 minus 1 is 0, right? So whenever we were modeling, we had a +1 and a -1, those would cancel out because they create 0 pairs. They're a pair that when you combine them, they make 0. Okay. So here we go. We are adding numbers with different signs. So let's look at example 1, and let's look at these notes up here at the top for different signs. So when I'm adding numbers with different signs, we subtract the number with the smaller absolute value from the number with the greater absolute value. So we basically subtract the smaller number from the larger number. So when we're adding numbers with different signs, we are really doing subtraction. Okay, when we're adding numbers with different signs, we're really doing subtraction. We then keep the sign of the greater absolute value. So we keep the sign of the number that has the greatest absolute value. Keep the sign of the number with the greatest absolute value. So here's what I mean by that. Let's look at this first example, -11 plus 6. So I am adding two numbers with different signs. So because of that, they have different signs and I'm adding them. That means I know I have to subtract them. I'm always going to put the larger number on top when I subtract the smaller number on the bottom, so I can actually complete my subtractions. 11 minus 6 is 5. So I have that part down. Now I have to determine if my answer is positive or negative. I'm going to use the sign of the number with the greatest absolute value. Or really, I'm just using the sign of the larger number. So really when I'm asking myself, do I have more negatives here or do I have more positives here? If I were to do my counter chips, I would have 11 negatives here, okay? And this would be go on for 11, and I would only have 6 positives. So I have more negatives than I do positives. So therefore, my answer has to be negative. The larger absolute value is 11. The absolute value of -11 is 11. The absolute value of 6 is 6. So the number with the larger absolute value, -11, is +11. Okay? So the larger number, there's more negatives of it, so my answer has to be negative. Let's look at another one so you can kind of get a better idea of what I'm talking about here. So number 2, I'm adding a positive with the negative. So I have 27 plus -30. So because I'm adding a positive with a negative, I'm adding two numbers with different signs. I know I'm subtracting them, so I'm going to do 30 minus 27. Notice how I'm doing 30 minus 27 and not 27 minus 30. This is wrong because I can't do 27 minus 30. Okay, we can't actually calculate that. We can't work that out. So instead, I'm going to do 30 minus 27, which is 3. Now I have to determine if my answer is positive or negative. Well, 30 is a bigger number than 27. I have more negatives than I do positives. There's more, because 30 is the bigger number and it's negative. That means my answer is -3. Okay? Now, we have 4 more to work on. Let's do 7 again. I want you to see one more at least together, and then I want you to try a couple on your own. So for number 7, I have -51 plus 23. So one reason why we don't want to model this is no one wants to draw 51 negative counters and 23. It's going to take a long time and a lot of paper. So that's why we have our rule. So I'm adding two numbers I'm adding a positive with a negative. So I'm adding two numbers with different signs, which means I subtract them. Okay, and then I keep the sign of the bigger number. So I can right away figure out if my answer is positive or negative. I keep the sign of the bigger number. 51 is bigger than 23, and 51 is negative, so my answer has to be negative. I'm going to write that negative sign down so I don't forget it. And now I can actually figure out, well, what is 51 minus 23? Well, I got to borrow here And that's going to give me 8. Negative 28. That's my final answer. I'm done. For number 8, 10 plus negative 18. 10 plus negative 18. So again, right away I can determine, is my answer positive or negative? Well, I have more negatives than I do positives. I have 18 negatives, 10 positives, so my answer has to be negative. And then I know they're different signs, so I'm going to subtract. 18 minus 10 is 8, so my answer is negative 8. All right, so what I want you to do is I want you to try 9 and 10 on your own. So hit pause, give it a shot, see how you do, and then go ahead and play this, figure out if you did it right or if you did it wrong. All right, so first, before we finish these problems, I want to give you guys a quick math joke. Why should you worry about the math teacher who is holding on to some graph paper? So why should you worry about the math teacher who is holding on to graph paper? Well, you should worry because he is definitely plotting something. You get it? Graph paper, plotting something, putting down points, plotting them on a coordinate plane. Got graph paper, you're plotting points, right? Ha-ha! All right, moving forward. So, looking at number 9. 13 plus negative 13. So I'm adding a positive with a negative, so I know I have to subtract. So I'll do 13 minus 13. Well, that's 0. So is my answer positive or negative? Well, it doesn't matter, it's 0. 25 plus negative 26. I have more negatives than I do positives. 26 is the larger number, and it is negative, so my answer has to be negative. 26 minus 25 is 1. So my answer is negative 1. And that's it. Okay, so with the things to remember, though, what I want you guys to jot down is we're going to kind of summarize the rules between adding numbers with the same sign and adding numbers with different signs. So, if we're adding numbers with the same sign, this is lesson 1.1. If we're adding numbers with the same sign, we always kept that sign, keep the sign, and add the numbers together. And add numbers. If we're adding numbers with different signs, we subtract the numbers. And then we keep the sign of the bigger number. Okay? So that is summarizing both 1.1 and 1.2. So if we didn't want a model, we don't have to. We follow these rules. If I'm adding numbers with the same sign, if you want to have an example for things to remember, you can. So if it's like negative 5 plus negative 6, that would be adding two negative numbers. I keep that sign, add them together. 5 plus 6 is 11. If I'm adding numbers with different signs, so negative 5 plus positive 6, different signs I subtract, keep the sign of the larger number. So it's positive because I have more positives than negatives. 6 is bigger than 5. 6 is bigger than 5. And 6 minus 5 is 1. Okay? Hopefully this helped. If you guys have any questions, do not hesitate to ask. Thank you for watching. G out.